We closed our part 2 by telling you how Jackie's career was now being managed by a popsicle salesman. We also told you how Jackie made one bad business decision after another. First, by not being interested at all in the financial portion of his career, which was bad enough. But then he compounded that by giving his manager power of attorney. Then went on to make his other bad decisions even worse by using his manager's attorney and not hiring one of his own. All of this was basically an example of how not to handle your music career. We pick up part 3 talking about Jackie doing one of his favorite things. Because it's been a few minutes since we talked about Wilson and his extramarital escapades, so that means it's time to talk about yet another one of those. A woman that Wilson had an affair with was Lee Angel. Angel was perhaps best known as Little Richard's ex-girlfriend. I know it sounds crazy to talk about Little Richard having a girlfriend, but he did at the time. In 1957, after Little Richard gave up rock and roll to become a Christian minister, he and Lee broke up. Later that year, Lee met Jackie, and they'd had an affair that was on and off for several years since that time. Angel knew Wilson was married. Once, she went into Jackie's dressing room before one of his shows, and his wife Frida was already there. Partly out of respect for Frida's presence, but also out of fear of Frida, Angel tried to leave the room. However, Jackie wouldn't let her go. He told her not to leave. Then he turned around and told his wife, "Now, if you don't want to fight tonight, don't let her go. If she disappears, you know what's going to happen when we get back to Washington." Jackie then left to go on stage to do his show. Once he left, Lee again tried to leave. This time she was stopped by Frida. Frida let Lee know that she was aware of who she was. She also asked Lee to do her a favor. What was the favor she wanted? She asked her not to leave. Frida was impressed by the fact that Lee had done her best to show Frida respect despite Jackie not allowing her to. Frida respected that, which led to her and Lee becoming friends. Now, how many of y'all out there are going to become friends with the side piece? In the midst of all his cheating, never fear, Jackie was still putting in work at home. He and Frida had their 4th child. A boy, Anthony, was born on February 21st, 1958. Wilson also had another woman who was in love with him. This is a rich white woman. Her name was Carol. For years, she'd take care of Frida and the kids, lavishing them with gifts anytime Frida would have a new baby. During this entire time, Frida claimed she had no idea that this woman was in love with Jackie. She just thought the woman was being nice, because rich white women are always kind to black people. Always. In Jackie's career, things were starting to happen on a national stage, literally, because he had his first chance to be on national TV in 1959 on the show American Bandstand. While he was on it, he sang his hit The Lonely Teardrops. Meanwhile, off stage, as far as his money was concerned, Wilson's blind trust in Nat Tonopah was already beginning to come back to haunt him. Before we talk about that part though, let's explain what a couple of things are. At the time, songs were of course released on full albums, but they were also released on what were called 45s. 45s were smaller than albums, so basically think of like a small record with a bigger hole in the middle. And they generally only had 2 songs on them. One side was called the A side. That was the side with the song that the label was trying to push. This is the one that you're supposed to like. This is the one they play on the radio all the time. For Jackie, that would be a song like Repeat. The other side of the 45 was called the B side. That song was generally one of the weaker songs off the album. Y'all know, these are the songs that you usually skip when you play a whole album from beginning to end. Y'all also know they're not going to give you 2 good songs for the price of one. So the B side was usually not a song the label expected much from. Why? It was strictly about making more money. Because if both songs were hits, then you might not want or need to buy the entire album. The idea was to get you to buy the hits individually, or worst case scenario, to just buy the whole album. Now, back to the story. One of the ways Turner Paul would cheat Wilson, as well as songwriters of other A-side songs, was to ensure that the B-side was a song credited to either his friends or to a relative. He did this because the royalties of a 45 were split directly down the middle, 50-50 between the A-side and the B-side. So in other words, the A-side could be a #1 hit song. So think of whatever your favorite song is being on one side, while the B-side could literally just be somebody reading directions from a recipe or reading some nonsense or anything other than the actual song. Didn't matter, because the sales are being pushed by the opposite side. That meant the A-side often carried the B-side to big sales. Additionally, a lot of songs that were credited to, as it would say on the label, N. Turner Paul for Nat Turner Paul, or Lena Agree, who was Turner Paul's aunt, were really written by a man named Alonzo Tucker. For his efforts, Tucker was also allowed to serve as Wilson's chauffeur. He also was supplied with a free place to sleep. That seems like a fair trade, doesn't it? Write hit songs, be a chauffeur, have your own place to sleep. And of course, Alonzo was a black man. Turner Paul kept Jackie out on a financial limb as well. That way, Jackie would always have to be touring and performing to make more money. And they worked artists hard at the time. They were working every night, and a lot of nights they did multiple shows. They would do several shows a night, consecutive nights. So he's forced to constantly do this in order to make money for himself, and of course, as far as the label was concerned, for them. In 1959, Jackie was earning between $2,000 and $3,000 a night. At this time, the average American man was making about $100 a week. So y'all know that means your average black man was making about $50 a week. Some quick calculations let you know that Jackie was making more in one night than the average brother man was making in a whole year. Wilson's earliest contracts also paid him royalties of 3% of retail, with a minimum of $50,000 a year. Now, to earn that money, Jackie would often be summoned in the middle of the night to entertain clients of the label. What does entertain clients mean? Take from it what you will, but when I hear quote unquote entertain clients and quote unquote middle of the night, I don't think too many people were summoning him because they wanted to hear Lonely Teardrops at 2:30 in the morning. For people that have been listening to us since the first episode, you already know that we mentioned a man named Al Green earlier. Not Al Green, the singer that everybody knows, but Al Green was the man that was Jackie's original manager that died the night before Jackie was ready to sign his contract with Decca/Brunswick Records. Jackie's attorney was a man named Herbert Lipman. Lipman was Al Green's nephew. In addition to that, he's also a close friend of Nat Turner Paul's. Jackie's accountant was a person named Isidore Izzy Silverman, who was also a close friend of Turner Paul's. So everybody around him is friends. Jackie's the employee. Imagine how many times those three people, Jackie's manager, Jackie's accountant, and Jackie's attorney, would just sit around and laugh at him because they were robbing him blind. And he wasn't even smart enough to know that they were doing it. It's a shame, y'all. Turner Paul also began to supply Jackie with material that would allow him to cross over to a white audience. This was unusual at the time for a black artist. To help with exposing the white audience to Wilson's music, Turner Paul relied on his friendship with a DJ named Alan Freed. Freed at the time had a popular radio show that focused on playing R&B music for his predominantly white and teenage audience. In fact, rumor has it that Freed once played one of Jackie's songs, called I'll Be Satisfied, for 45 straight minutes on his show. The relationship between Turner Paul and Freed seemed like payola. What's payola? For those of you who are unaware, payola was an illegal practice where radio DJs were paid to play certain records. It was everywhere in the music industry at the time. Again, it was illegal, but it was something that people were doing. Now, in spite of all the success that Jackie had, his wife and their 4 children still lived in the house that Jackie grew up in. If that wasn't bad enough, his mother still lived in that house too. And also, if that wasn't bad enough, Jackie's de facto stepdaddy also lived there as well. In the meantime, Jackie stayed in a luxurious apartment in New York. Now let's paint a picture for you. Imagine that you're Frida, Jackie's wife, and your husband makes more money in 1 week than any average man, regardless of what color he is, would make in several years. But you and your 4 kids live with his mama and her baby daddy in your husband's childhood home. Meanwhile, your husband lives several states away in New York. He lives in the lap of luxury in a bachelor pad. Also keep in mind that she knows he has women running in and out of that place every night. How do you think that would feel? Y'all know how people are. Frida was probably always hearing stuff like this. Girl, that couldn't be me. And of course people had advice on what she should be doing, what they would do in her situation if that was them. Eventually Frida had enough. She either heard enough or she just got sick and tired of being sick and tired. Whatever caused it to happen, Frida threatened that she and the kids would come live with Jackie if he didn't buy her a house of her own. And Jackie had no intention of having his freedom or his lifestyle interrupted by having his kids and his wife come live with him. So he finally broke down and did what she wanted and bought her a house. But true to his lifestyle, true to his exaggeration and his boasting, he bragged that he paid $45,000 for the house. But the real truth was, house only cost $30,000. Lying to kick it. Now at the time, he was not wanting to buy his wife a house. He was lavishing gifts on Harleen Harris. We already talked about her before, so you know who that is. He was wooing her with furs and jewelry. And meanwhile, along with not being able to get him to buy her a house, Frida was struggling to get him to send the amount of money she needed to support herself and her children. And as we just pointed out, even when he did do right by them, he was lying about that and making it seem bigger than it really was. So we'll stop right there for the story here to end part 3. But never fear, there's still a lot more to tell about Wilson and his life. Hadn't even gotten shot yet. He still has to get married again. He still has to name his son after one of his favorite comic book characters. And he still has to be hung by his heels and forced to sign a contract, Big Red style. By the way, you're halfway through this Jackie Wilson ride. Why get off the ride now? It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. And you're invested now. Come on back for part 4. See you soon.